All right, so now we're going to broaden out from China to East Asia. And so the 20th century has really been one of success, economic success for these countries. So you can see some of the big ones over here. We have Taiwan, South Korea. I guess we're going a little bit into Southeast Asia and South Asia, but you can see in general, many of them have had positive growth experiences. Okay, and so we're gonna kind of focus in on Taiwan and South Korea to try to understand what was behind this fabulous economic success in the 20th century. Okay. So again, we saw this in the very beginning, but here's South Korea, the night lights of South Korea. Again, this is a proxy for development. And you can see that South Korea is very developed, especially compared to North Korea. You can see Asia on the whole. Again, the night lights are going to kind of track the most developments. You can see here's Japan all lit up, the richest per capita, or one of the richest per capita. South Korea, here we have Taiwan, and then here we have mainland China. So you can see kind of the richest areas of Asia just by looking at the nightlight map. You can see India is also becoming more developed. All right, just for comparison, this is what the nightlights look in Europe. It's a little blurry, but you can see it's on par. These parts of Japan, at least in nightlights wise, are on par with the most developed areas in Europe. Okay, and it should be noted when we're talking about South Korea and Taiwan, these are poor countries. When we go back to the mid 20th century, 1960, these are not exceedingly, but these are not developed countries. By the time we get to 1990, over this 30 years, these countries have exploded. So they average roughly between 6 and 7% growth rate, GDP growth rate per year, per capita GDP growth rate per year. So the U.S., just for comparison, is a 2% averages a year. So this is a significant development, over this 30-year time period. Okay. And so we're going to focus in on two of the sources that may have led to these countries' success. One, a high accumulation of human capital. So they have high levels of human capital, education essentially, and they are also fairly equal in terms of wealth. And so essentially they have like those preconditions, like they have fairly equal society with lots of human capital, lots of education. And essentially once these countries switch to a market economy, their growth takes off. Okay, so let's look at the human capital. So this is going back to 1960. So if we were to just look at their GDP, if we just look at these countries' GDP, these are poor countries, remember, in 1960. And so we would predict them to only have a 57 or 62% enrollment in primary school, but their actual enrollments are much higher. When we go to secondary school, again, we see the same thing. And the literacy rates, we would predict these countries to have just a 31% or 36% literacy rate, when the actual numbers are much higher. Again, this is in 1960. This is prior to their development. So even when they're a poor country, they have much higher levels of school attendance and much higher literacy levels. So these places are much more educated than other comparable poor countries. This is when we look at wealth equality. So here we have the Gini coefficient for income. So lower is more equal. Here's the Gini coefficient for land. So both Korea and Taiwan are fairly equal, relative to the rest of the world, on both income and land. All right. Here we have the most equal on land, which is Finland over here. But these countries are basically more equal. And again, this is before their development. So these are very equal countries prior to their development. So they have these two things going for them. They're very egalitarian and there's high levels of education. Okay. So where did that equality of wealth come from? Well, there were a series of land reforms that redistributed land in these Asian countries. And essentially, these had very positive results. and it essentially took up the agricultural land and then divided it equally amongst the peasants with the goal of trying to limit rich landowners, limit rich landowners, and then also get rid of landless poor peasants. So essentially, it's empowering peasants, and it's disempowering to the land owners who may, again, these landowners, these elites, these like landed elites, are oftentimes the people who oppose policies that will promote economic growth because it might displace them. Okay, we're gonna take a break here before we find out where before we go in depth on those land reforms.